Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the third installment of NCEDA's webinar series. We have been exploring the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and offering our members up-to-date information on how this situation is impacting North Carolina and its economy, and how economic development professionals can be part of the solution. In a moment, I'll ask Chris Corey to introduce today's guest, the Governor of North Carolina. But first, I would like to thank the organizations and the companies that enable us to put on programs like this, and that's NCEDA's patron and annual sponsors. I won't go through the entire list today, but you will see their names and logos on your screen. We're grateful to all of these entities for the support they offer NCEDA today and every day of the year. Chris Corey joined NCEDA's Board of Directors last year and really hit the ground running with great ideas and new energy. He is an attorney in the Charlotte office of Nexen Pruitt. He is well known across the Carolinas for his expertise in transactional economic development law and corporate site selection. He has an exceptional educational background, which includes a master's degree from Duke University and a law degree from UNC. And to address the understandable curiosity that we all would have about where his team loyalty lies on game days, Chris is a lifelong Tar Heel fan. Here to introduce today's guest and moderate our discussion is Chris Corey. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat, and appreciate your leadership finding ways to keep us connected like this webinar series. It's an honor to join NCEDA members from around the state to welcome a good friend and today's guest speaker. Roy Cooper is the 75th governor of North Carolina, a position he was elected to in November 2016. He's a native of Nash County, a longtime attorney, and a former state legislator there, having served in both the State House and the State Senate. After that, for 16 years, he was North Carolina's Attorney General. That makes this his 33rd year in public service of North Carolina. As governor, he has announced some of our most impactful job creation projects in recent years, including names like Eli Lilly, Allstate, Honeywell, and Triangle Tire. As the state's chief executive, Governor Cooper has been at the forefront of North Carolina's efforts to combat the deadly COVID-19 pandemic. He has worked to balance the public health needs of the state with the interests of North Carolina's $566 billion economy. This morning, the governor will brief us on the state's efforts. Also joining him is another good friend, Ken Udy, one of the governor's top policy advisors. We're grateful that they've set aside time to join us this morning. We know our members are eager and appreciative to hear from the governor and from Ken, and will want to chime in with a few questions later. In the meantime, I'll turn over our virtual podium to Governor Roy Cooper. Governor, welcome.
I'm very grateful for the great working relationship that I've had with the NCEDA and the good work that you have done across our state in attracting strong economic development. I will just tell you, I was very pleased at the direction that we were headed before this pandemic hit. We had worked very hard to recruit businesses both in rural and urban areas, and we're having significant success. Our pipeline is still strong too. A lot of companies that are poised and ready to come to North Carolina, and some of those are put it in neutral to wait and see what's going to happen with this pandemic, but believe that North Carolina is poised to really take off. We now know that we've been in the midst of something that we had never experienced before, and I'll tell you, as I examine all of the challenges that North Carolina faced that I was ready to tackle as governor, global pandemic was not on the checklist. But we are where we are, and I believe that I have appointed by far the most qualified and competent cabinet in the history of the state, and we've had some amazing cabinet members of governors past throughout the history of our state. I think it's not only the most qualified, but the most diverse, and they have really been shining during this pandemic with the good work that they've done. I'm also proud of the tremendous staff that we've assembled in the governor's office, people who've been very successful in our state, both in the public and private arena. And one of those is Ken Udy, who is my senior advisor, and he'll be on this call. I won't be able to stay on for the entire call, but Ken will be on for the entire call. We've approached this pandemic with three thrusts in mind. Number one, to make sure that people who get sick from COVID-19 are able to get quality medical care. Number two, to slow the spread of this virus. And we have been able to do that with strong education for the people of North Carolina and restrictions that have allowed for a lot of economic activity, but which have worked to flatten the curve. And I've been very proud of the people of North Carolina who have stepped up and done what they needed to do. And the third thing has been to make sure that we cushion the economic blow to our state. We know that when you have the numbers of people who have filed for unemployment, the numbers of small businesses, which are the backbone of our economy, not only in our state, but in our country, that are hanging by a thread, that we have a real threat to our economy. We've worked very hard to get unemployment compensation payment out to people in North Carolina, system being overwhelmed, but they're making significant progress now, getting that money into the economy. We've worked to push the federal government with the Paycheck Protection Program and the stimulus money, getting more money into the economy. And right now, the General Assembly is meeting. We proposed a strong budget proposal that helps to provide money for not only public health, but for small businesses through the Golden Leaf Foundation and the Rural Center with their rapid loan program for small businesses. We're going to continue to push for that. And we also know that we're going to have to take some strong steps to reignite our economy. We've set up what we believe is a very strong system based on evidence, data, science, and facts, which are going to measure our progress against this virus. We know that it is highly infectious. We know that some people become very sick and die from this virus. And so we have taken steps to measure where we want to be, the number one priority being that we do not want our health system and our hospital system to be overwhelmed. And we have been successful in doing that. And we've set a number of measurements that we want to achieve so that we can begin a phased easing of these restrictions and reigniting our economy. We've wanted to keep steady or lower our hospitalizations, the total number of positive tests, the percentage of positive tests. And we've also wanted to ramp up our testing and contact tracing, which we have done. We're going to need a high level of this in order for us to function in the new normal. And we also know reigniting our economy is going to take input from our business community and from you as economic developers. We know that there's going to be a psychology for this. In some states that have tried to ease a lot of restrictions very early, they've not seen a lot of success because people just aren't ready to re-engage. People still don't feel safe out and about. And what we're going to have to do is to create an atmosphere of safe places for people to go so that employees feel safe and customers feel safe, and that we've adjusted to a new normal that is going to help us to reignite the economy while at the same time making sure that people are as safe as possible, because we know that this virus is going to continue to be with us until we get a vaccine. We know that there is a potential for a second surge. So we have to be ready with innovative ideas on reigniting the economy. One of the things I'd love for you guys to be thinking about is, in this new world with this pandemic, what kind of businesses can we recruit or create in North Carolina to meet the needs that are being caused by COVID-19. Already we have pulled in our textile manufacturers, and many of them have changed their production lines to produce personal protective equipment, which is in tremendous need right now across the world, and it will continue to be as long as this virus is with us. What kind of government policies or incentives can we put in place to accelerate those businesses? What can you guys as economic developers do to bring back the kind of personal protective equipment and pharmaceutical manufacturing that is moved offshore? How can we move it onshore? Just as I have relied on the healthcare experts and the scientists to help me manage this pandemic, I'm going to need your help and your guidance in determining how North Carolina recovers. We cannot stay home forever. This is not sustainable. We need to get people back to work. I think North Carolina wage earners want to do that, and we will get into the rhythm of a new normal and find the best way forward. And I know that most of you are concerned about the disruption that the coronavirus has caused the communities that you represent. I know that you're concerned about people's health and safety, but also concerned about the long-term effects on the economy. And I want to do what I can to make sure people are protected, but that we build the kind of economy that responds to this virus and is better than ever before. So I want to, Chris, open it up for comments that you all would think that we would need to hear. And if I do have to jump off in a few minutes, certainly Ken will report back to me. But I am again very grateful to have you all as advisors, to have you all out there recruiting companies to our state, trying to keep the ones that we already have here strong. And I believe from the bottom of my heart that we will get through this. We will depend on each other to get us through this, and we can be better on the other end. We need to try to get health insurance to every North Carolinian. We need to have high-speed internet access all over our state, and we can do that. And this pandemic shines a light on how much we need that for remote education for our K through 12 students who are getting remote education now, for telemedicine that we need now more than ever, and to boost our small businesses. So we're ready to tackle all of those issues, and I am still very, very grateful to the people of our state. A lot of things happening now give me hope, and really grateful for the fact that you all are here and ready to talk to us. So, Chris?
Fantastic. Thank you, Governor. Governor, so several questions coming in and some compliments for your leadership. We know that you set May 8th as a target for the current shelter-in-place policy to perhaps come to an end. Wanted to ask, and there's questions about this, your best guess, looking beyond that on when we might begin to reopen North Carolina's economy, and maybe your thoughts on kind of how that rolls out.
Sure. I think it's important to note that a lot of our economy is already moving very well, and a lot of businesses are thriving in this new way of doing businesses. We were very generous with the way that we described essential businesses and pretty much let businesses that could show that they were social distancing be declared as quote unquote essential. So we did not close a lot of businesses regarding whether they were essential or non-essential. We did specifically close some businesses where people tend to congregate and gather and stand or sit beside each other for long periods of time, like restaurants and bars and bingo parlors and theaters, and also businesses that require personal services where you can't socially distance, like hair salons and barbers and massage therapists and those kinds of things. What we have set up is, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at these trends that are so important to trying to get a hold of the virus, like our level of hospitalizations, the number of positive cases, the percentage of positive tests that we have, the numbers of testing that we're able to do in a day. We're making great progress in all of those areas, and we want to see a leveling of that. And we are hoping that on May 9th, we can enter into the first phase. We don't want to say that yet because we have said that we're going to be looking at all of these items, and we're going to make judgments based on what the facts and data and science tell us. We can enter into the first phase and begin to amend the stay-at-home order to make people to be able to go out and engage in more kinds of commerce. Moving into phase 2, we would begin to open bars and restaurants at limited capacity and increasing the numbers in a mass gathering, and try to phase our way into this thing while we try to protect our hospital beds and protect our hospital system and to get people used to a new normal. So we're hoping that things will go smoothly, and we're hoping these numbers will continue to trend in the right way. And I know you're glad that our public health people were able to work out Coca-Cola 600, no fans, strong social distancing.
Yes,
NASCAR
sir.
and Charlotte Motor Speedway produced some really good plans about how they're going to keep people protected, and I think it'll be good for our economy and give people something to watch.
Amen.
Which
That's a
will be
little
positive.
light out there. Yeah, Governor, getting some questions about testing, and you've referred to it a couple times. It's kind of confusing. Maybe you can help us understand what you envision as the necessary testing that will roll out to complement our reopening of the economy. Is this through private sector testing? Is it public sector? Is it coordinated between the two? How will testing you envision? How do you envision that to roll out?
It's a combination of things. You have to sort of go back to the beginning, and when this COVID-19 was coming onto the scene, there needed to be a test created in order to be able to detect the presence of the virus. Some countries that had seen this first had created a test. We were told in January that the CDC was going to create a test, and for us to wait for that, and our public labs did wait patiently. Finally, when they got the test, it did not work, and they had to go back to the drawing board. So our entire country got behind from the early going. On the testing side of things, we continued to be promised the test kits, the supplies that you needed to do it, but we got very little. And at the end of the day, we realized that we were not going to be able to depend on the feds on testing. So we turned to the private sector and to our great universities to begin the process. And of course, LabCorp's headquarters right here in North Carolina. And so the private sector began to create tests that the FDA approved, that our lab approved. And we now have relationships with 14 labs, both public and private, in the state of North Carolina right now. And I'm pleased at the way we are going, at the rate we are going, in creating the number of diagnostic tests that we need. You know, what you want to get to is a point where if an employee has is test positive at a business, be able to go in and test all of the employees and to figure out where you are and who you need to quarantine to keep your business safe. We want to be able to do that for nursing homes and other places. We've already loosened the criteria for getting tests. You know, right now, you know, where we want to be by the time we go into phase 1 is to be doing around 5,000 tests a day. I believe that we will be able to get there. We want to continue to increase our number of diagnostic tests. One of the issues involved in all of this, and I know this is a long answer to the question, but it's important to all of this.
Yeah.
Personal protective equipment is necessary to do these diagnostic tests. And there's been a massive shortage of personal protective equipment. We are increasing that, and it's good. Good old capitalism and entrepreneurship is stepping to the forefront, so more and more of it is being increased, but that has limited testing somewhat because of the rationing of personal protective equipment. There are new tests beginning on the market where people can swab themselves that would not require personal protective equipment, and those tests are in the middle of being approved, and then they create their own supply chain issues because you need certain swabs to be able to do this self-administered test. Suffice to say that we are working night and day on testing. We want North Carolina for that to be part of our economic recovery, to be a part of the personal protective equipment, to increase all of that. We know that the more testing we have, the easier it will be for us to enter into a new normal where people can feel safer about being protected from this virus, because the only way to do it right now is through social distancing, is the way to protect yourself from the virus until we get a vaccine. So continuing to increase the testing. I figured out a few months ago that we states were pretty much going to be on our own. I've been proud to be a governor in this country right now. I think governors on both sides of the aisles have been strong leaders in their states. I talk with the president and the vice president every week, and sometimes 3 times a week we have conference calls. We've appreciated all of the help that we have gotten from the administration. They announced some additional things they were going to do for the states. They pretty much now admitted that it's the state's responsibility to do what it needs to do in testing, but they want to continue helping and want it to be a partnership. So we're trying to figure out exactly what additional help that we will be able to get from the federal government on testing, but we're ramping it up. We're working hard. We are on track to get what we need to begin the phased opening, but we want to get to a point where testing is plentiful and people can continue to be testing, and we can use it to try to get people separated and quarantined so that we can feel safer out there and be out there conducting business.
Gotcha. Governor, one last question about testing. Do you envision this is going to be orchestrated, like North Carolinians will be receiving a direction or instructions and encouraged to go at a certain time or get a test within a certain window at a certain location? Is that what this will look like?
Yeah, I think we are certainly getting to that, and we are working on more remote locations. Right now, you still need to have a doctor say that you need to have a test in order to be able to get a test, but we've loosened the criteria, and pretty much doctors have their own medical judgment at this point. You don't necessarily have to follow a certain criteria because we've gotten more tests on the market. But I do think we're going to want to be getting into a place where people can have tests just to be able to show that they don't have it. So, I don't know if we're going to reach the point where you need to flash your negative to be able to get in somewhere, because that only works for so long. You can be a negative at one point and then a positive at another time. But I think the testing, and the more testing we have, the better off that we're going to be able to run our economy in the new normal.
Gotcha.
I'm gonna leave it, Chris, because I got to get off on another call. Ken will be on the line to answer additional questions, but and he'll report to me at the end of the day. But really grateful to get a chance to talk to you guys today.
Thank you so much, Governor. We know your time is very limited right now, and we're very grateful and appreciate all your public service. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Appreciate it.
Ken Udy, welcome.
Thank you.
Ken, don't know if you want to say a couple remarks to our folks, the NCEDA members, before we get started, but delighted that you can eager to get to some questions.
Thank you, Chris. Well, I've been noticing the questions, and I think that the questions that you're asking are the right questions. I have some answers to some of them, and there are others that we are still working on, but I'm happy to try to address some of those questions.
Fantastic. Let me jump in real quick, Ken, and ask you, you alluded to it earlier, your thoughts about expanding broadband in North Carolina and how this crisis has really underscored the need and dependence for broadband and sufficient broadband access for us all to interact in this economy.
Well, I've seen a number of articles, particularly in national media, about how the COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare some of the real vulnerabilities of states, and I think this is we're an example of one of those, and universal high-speed internet access is Exhibit A. We have, for 3 years, we have been proposing dramatically more spending than the legislature has approved to complete broadband access across North Carolina. And there are 3 reasons for that. All of those, again, underscored and bold-faced by the coronavirus. The first is economic development. Companies are just not going to locate in communities that don't have adequate high-speed internet access. They just aren't. Moreover, you have many, particularly in our rural areas, you may have craftsmen, artisans, entrepreneurs who have a great idea, but if they can't connect with the markets, they're in a really difficult position to grow their individual businesses. So that's the first thing. The second thing is telemedicine. We get a report about medical practices that have closed or have reduced hours or have gone to telemedicine. We also have the governor issued an executive order expanding telemedicine. That's going to be codified in legislation, we hope, over the next day or two here in Raleigh. But the importance of telemedicine, particularly in rural areas, continues to be of utmost importance. And then the third reason that broadband is important is because of the achievement gap. Our students have been learning remotely and will for the rest of the school year. We don't know how it's going to work in the, when it's time to restart school, but clearly it's highlighted our need to have high-speed internet access in the homes of students just so they can get their assignments, much less have all the resources that children in urban communities have. So those 3 things, it's really crucial. I'll tell you this, Chris, the governor has spoken with nearly 100 groups like this one since the executive order. And it rarely is failed to be mentioned as an issue, this high-speed internet access. So there's a crying need, and we really, I think it's important for us to elevate that in our conversations about recovery.
Gotcha. Thanks, Ken. Got a great question here from Sherry Wilburn in Person County. She says, we have a manufacturer that wants to pivot to PPE, but the cost and availability of the equipment and testing costs is prohibitive. Are there any resources to support?
Chris, when I saw that question, Sherry, I took down your name, and we'll have somebody calling you. We don't have obvious sources. You know, we have one NC that's more discretionary, but that is limited. We have some building reuse funds. We have some rural infrastructure authority funds. It's not clear to me that statutorily that we can use those funds for this purpose. But believe me, Secretary Copeland, Liz Crable, Deputy Secretary who's on this call, they will be looking in every location to find ways to support companies that want to do this. There was another question about what are we doing to follow up on the real possibility, the governor mentioned it, that it will be a policy of the federal government, and I believe it will certainly be an emphasis for us to reshore our PPE industry. We don't need to be dependent on another government to fulfill our needs. Same thing is true with pharmaceutical manufacturing. As you know, a lot of the molecules are created and mixed in other places and then shipped back here for packaging. And particularly when it comes to vaccines and penicillin, essential drugs like that, they ought to be here. And there's no better place in America to do that than North Carolina, given our, I think, a critical mass of pharma companies, not only pharma, but also pharmaceutical services, contract research organizations like IQVIA and PPD that can manage clinical trials. So we've already begun to talk to some of our contacts in biopharma and some of our contacts in the textile manufacturing business to brainstorm with us on what we would need in order to lead the pack on that.
Appreciate you addressing that. Yeah, a lot of questions and comments coming in about that. Ken, here's one. Any thoughts about, we've seen headlines where the federal PPP loans have seemingly often missed their mark for really small businesses that were in dire need. Anything you see on the horizon for the state to offer to fill in some of that gap for very small companies?
Yes. So the Golden Leaf Foundation offered $15 million initially for these, what they call bridge loans. That fund was oversubscribed in 24 hours. I think they had 2,300 applications for that $15 million. The governor had proposed $75 million. We had understood, this is for the short session, we had understood that was the appetite in the legislature. The House budget proposal includes $75 million. The Senate budget that is being debated right now in the Appropriations Committee included $125 million. We'd be happy with $125 million going to Golden Leaf, because they and the Rural Center, they partner to get that money out to qualified banks who the banks who do this type of lending. And even then, I think $125 million will not be enough. It's anticipated that the legislature will come back to Raleigh after they wrap up this session. They'll come back sometime in the summer, perhaps July, and I'm sure we'll be coming back and asking for more money for those types of loans.
Fantastic. Few questions here. Going back to some of the testing and some of the healthcare issues. Does the state, do y'all have any insight in the governor's office about advancement and progress on a vaccine? Something more than maybe we'd be gleaning from the headlines?
The Duke has a vaccine lab that's working on a vaccine. We have a couple of biopharma companies that are looking to adapt molecules that they have developed for other viruses. So there is some of that. And then there was a question: is our goal to wait until a vaccine exists? I think it's the governor's position that we cannot wait for a vaccine. That we have to bend this curve down, make sure that we have enough hospital capacity if there is a surge in hospitalization cases. We have to really work with our businesses so that they have resources and best practices to sanitize and to social distance. And then we have to be respectful in terms of wearing masks, in terms of keeping our distance. We don't, the governor is very clear. He doesn't think that we can wait until the vaccine is developed. That, honestly, when you hear people say that can be developed in a couple of months, that for us, that falls into the category of too good to be true. We hope it is. We hope we're wrong about that, but that's not what we're basing planning on.
Gotcha. The governor referred to the good news that the Coca-Cola 600 will run, albeit in a very different form, and that makes us think about tourism and how important that is in North Carolina. And several questions along those lines. For example, can you address North Carolina counties that rely disproportionately on tourism and visitation by leisure travels? Your thoughts on that? So counties, Buncombe County, other coastal and mountain counties relying so much on tourism, and this has been extraordinarily painful for them.
Tourism is one of our most important industries in the state, and it matters so much. It is so dominant in our mountains and in our coast and in our golfing communities. So we are working very hard to figure out how to get these coastal areas, mountain areas, golfing communities back and going as soon as possible, as soon as it's safe to do so. We are slicing and dicing the data that we're getting every day from the hospitals and from local health departments to determine if parts of the state can be opened. The governor mentioned the psychology of this. It's going to be important for people who live in, let's say, Wisconsin, to feel safe about coming to the North Carolina mountains. It's going to be important for people in Washington, D.C. To feel like North Carolina is safe and they can come to the Outer Banks because, the Outer Banks is a big destination for people who live in Washington. And so I think that the measures that we are taking now, although they feel, they really make us uncomfortable, that if they see that we are looking at data, that we are basing our decisions on that and not on our feelings or our druthers, we believe that it will make North Carolina more attractive to come back to when we do reopen. I also mentioned, Chris, that there's a provision in the Senate budget, not in the House budget, not in our budget. There's a provision in the Senate budget to appropriate $5 million to our travel and tourism division for a reopening campaign when it's appropriate to launch that. I don't know if that will move forward or not, but there is a provision in the Senate budget for that.
Gotcha, thanks. Ken, you may be seeing some of these questions. Here's one about the type of recovery. It's remarked that I've heard of manufacturers seeing a V-shaped recovery based on their experience in China. what type of a recovery are we expecting in the months ahead?
This occupies a lot of the conversations that I've had with a number of our economists who work in universities and in our financial services industry, in our own Office of State Budget and Management. At first we were hearing, I don't know if it was a V, but maybe more of a U recovery. We may bump along the bottom for a little while before we begin to recover. One of the things that's true is that our economy had, in North Carolina, had very sound fundamentals before this hit. We were looking at I think another record year in terms of jobs and capital investment in this state. So our fundamentals are good. I have also done reading of some of the historical trends that have accompanied recessions, and those trends look more like a W than a V. In other words, you're here and then you go down, and then I believe this refers to the 2008, 9, 10, the 86, 81, back to 73. So they track this in 73. So if the economy starts here, then plunges, makes a rebound, that rebound does not sustain itself. There's another free fall, and then a second recovery. So, and that's historic with every recession we've had since 1973, when we had the Arab oil embargo. So, that's why they call economics the dismal science. Everybody has an opinion about this. We are prepared to believe that at a minimum, we'll have a budget shortfall this year, and we'll have a more significant budget shortfall for the budget that begins July 1 and goes to July or June 30th of 2021. We think it's going to take a while to recover.
And on that front, what do you expect the fiscal impact of that to be on statewide economic, workforce, and community development programs?
Well, on workforce programs, most of our workforce programs are at the state level are funded by U.S. Department of Labor dollars. It's a program that's the shorthand on it is called WIOA funding for workforce. Based on our recovery from COVID-19, there may be some adjustments in that, for more high demand positions. But I suspect that we'll continue on that. Just in terms of economic development, our economic incentive programs in North Carolina, we always have a combination of state and local incentives, are not large scale, and they are mostly earned in the form of tax credits that the employer against what the employer pays for its share of income withholding. So it's not a big actual real cash number that has to be appropriated. So I think that one of the areas in which the executive branch and the legislative branch have worked well together on is economic development. And so while you hear a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth about things like Medicaid expansion and public schools and teacher pay, we do actually work pretty well together on economic development projects.
Ken, this is a question that may not be in the wheelhouse of economic development, but it is a very important issue for the state. A question related to the courts. Question is, will family courts open sooner than June 1? The current situation allowing all sorts of abuses currently. That's a curious question. Obviously, it goes to bigger issues about the court system and the courts being suspended for a while. Obviously, very difficult and causing some complex situations. Thoughts on that, or any information you can share about that?
I don't really have information on that. Anything that I might say would be speculation. Although I would say, hardly a day goes by that the governor doesn't get sued about something. So that people are still able to file those lawsuits. I do know that.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry.
Let's see. Here's a question specific. For funds which are distributed through the Golden Leaf and Rural Center, are eligibility requirements, for example, tier 3s, are they relaxed to allow smaller industries in the urban cores to access support?
I believe that any business in North Carolina is eligible. They may give preference to tier 1 and tier 2, but I am not sure about what their criteria are. I'm sure it's on their website at Golden Leaf.
Terrific. Well, Ken, you have been so generous with your time. Any closing comments you want to share with our group?
Well, what I'd say is I appreciate the questions. Like I said at the beginning of my Q&A, I think y'all are asking the right questions. A lot of what the governor has asked me to do is to look at the post-COVID-19 economy. What are our opportunities? What are the gaps and the challenges that COVID-19 has just exacerbated and shown a spotlight on? And I think that a lot of your questions recognize some of those gaps and some of those challenges. So I just would encourage you to think broadly and deeply about the policies that we need, just in terms of the incentives, like in Person County. What are the ways that we can assist businesses that need to pivot to this post-COVID-19 world, bringing back PPE, bringing back more pharma basic manufacturing, and other businesses that might not be obvious to us. We would really appreciate your input on that. And I know many of you know me. We have a long-standing association with NCEDA that was about 25 years at Capstrat. So feel free to reach out to me personally. My email is ken.eudy, ken.eudy @nc.gov, and I'd be happy to discuss your ideas about how we can jumpstart this economy.
Fantastic, Ken. And I want to also, accept the governor's invitation. I'll tell you one topic that I really wanted to raise, but he pushed it back to our group, is because we're hearing a lot about this, that following this crisis, we can hopefully expect an onshoring of a lot of textile manufacturing, pharmaceutical production type of jobs and industry. So we'd like to answer that call to work with you, to work with the governor, and to try to come up with the right policies, the right incentives, the right recruitment efforts to make that happen and make the recovery happen faster and as robustly as possible. Really appreciate your public service. Really appreciate your time today. We know that y'all are very stretched in these challenging days. These are very complex matters that you're dealing with, and we thank you for tackling it all and appreciate the governor so much. So thank you for doing this.
Thanks for inviting us.
Also, one other thing, Ken, we'd love for you and the governor, when we're able to begin convening again, please come join us at our conferences, at our gatherings and meetings. We'd love to see you there and look forward to continuing to interact, and appreciate all your input.
Thanks, Pat, and all of you.
That concludes today's webinar. Our thanks go out to NCEDA's patron and annual sponsors for their generous support of programs like this. We're grateful to everyone who's joined us today. Stay tuned for additional information and upcoming webinars, as well as other events and offerings that we're working on. In the meantime, be well, stay connected, and best days ahead. Thank you.